How's everybody today? Good. Thank you for coming along and seeing us talk about big data. I was rehearsing not long ago in front of my 12-year-old son, who is a science geek and one of the greatest critics I have, and suggests, Dad, your presentation is a little bland and geeky. So I went and put some YouTube videos in, looking for some information on big data. And this is quite an interesting little clip that I found from Flip Flop on YouTube talking about big data. So I thought I might start with this, and it gets us thinking about what some of the uses are in big data before we actually get into talking about it. It's got a really good soundtrack about technology, and that was about it. I thought it really fit into the rap music that my kids listen to. But I was really amazed at the type of activities that big data is allowing organisations across the board to use to innovate, become more and more, I guess, productive and earn more revenue, as we're seeing here now what Blockbuster and Netflix do. Isn't it a bummer you can't get Netflix here?
Yeah. Well, you can. You just need to know how to feel it.
Yeah. Well, see, they're using it here now to determine what type of music or shows people like, who the actors should be, and how often it should be happening. So we're getting more and more augmented. Google Glass is not too far away. We all wear these bands, or some people wear these bands to tell us how much energy we have left. And it's growing at an exponential rate that we just, at the moment, are having problems or difficulties keeping up with. I like that term. I wonder if we're going to go for war for it. So, as I said, welcome to the JBS presentation this month on big data. Google tells me it's, well, we're not quite sure what it is. I don't think Google does know either. I'm Glen, Thompson, Senior Consultant with JBS Business Solutions. And I was asked a little bit earlier what my background was. Ex-military in the signals and intelligence area, and have, ever since I decommissioned or deinstitutionalised myself, have been involved in the information management and technology world, predominantly looking at data, big data, or, you know, as we used to know, just information. So have a look at that YouTube presentation, the video. It comes down to the term, what is big data? And by this definition, the term big data suggests that the term big data has become ubiquitous in discussions around the future of data visualisation and business intelligence. Although it is used in a range of different situations, the expression has become an umbrella term to explain the growth and the speed of increasing data globally. But what I find interesting is just there's not really that much of a consensus around the definition of big data. In fact, I'm really interested to see the words data visualisation and business intelligence, because there are so many different definitions around those terms as well. So after I found this slide and saw the YouTube video, I said, that's it, that's all I need to know. I'll just put that up, show everybody and take questions from here. I'm done. But then I thought it might look a little bit further to find out what the real explanation of big data is. And one of the side effects of big data, if you can call it that, is the growth in the ICT industry and the specific jobs or roles within an industry. And one of those is the emergence of what's called the data scientist. So I went and had a chat to my mate, Troy Sadkowski, who is a data scientist at QUT, looking after big data development for their Twitter research area up there. I said, Troy, mate, what is, in your opinion, big data? So interestingly, I don't know if he wanted me to get confused, so he gave me two definitions from his perspective. The first one is a definition he likes to use is that you have big data when your current tools cannot filter the required data out of it within the threshold of time that you need it. And then he went on to confuse me by saying, but you could also call it anything bigger than 100 gig. So, thanks, Troy. But let's break down his first, I guess, definition. So, in a pictorial sense, I'm very visual, so I need to write things down. What we could say is we've got a whole lot of data being funneled through yes, that's a laptop, sorry, a desktop, a bit ancient now, sorry. Our current tools divided by time equals big data. Does anyone disagree with what he's saying there? That's what pretty much a pictorial representation of what he's saying. But then throwing in the 100 gig, anything over 100 gig is the more generalised answer. Suggests then that really big data is only about the size of the information in the information repository. I don't know necessarily if that was the case. So, being a good digital citizen, I thought I can't believe anything I hear until I ask Dr. Google. So, I went to Google and I said to him, what is big data? And he came back with a very short list of precise answers telling me exactly what big data was. Has anyone seen Google ever do that for you? No. So on the first, it's interesting, on the first time I typed what is big data, or what just the term big data in the Google engine, it brought back 1,650,000,000 hits on possible opportunity or possible items that I could look at to find out what exactly big data was. So over the last 24 days, I've been going back occasionally to have a look. What is big data? Big data. She's changing the words around, and it alternated occasionally. But pretty much in the last 24 days, there have been 300 million additional items relating to the term big data added to the net. Now, they're not all bits of information or paper or what have you, but what it does demonstrate is that the amount of information that's being added to the web is increasingly significantly. So how did we get here? Well, from the dawn of humanity, I was very worried about using this slide to start off with. I was looking at it on the plane on the way down and I thought I had to cover it up a little bit. We've added, until 2003, we added 5 exabytes of data to the world's knowledge base. And that takes into account all the information, all the libraries at Alexandria, Petra, Dead Sea Scrolls, everything written right up to the point of time in 2003. But after 2003, we had an explosion of information. Can anyone tell me what company was founded at the end of 2003, beginning of 2004? Sorry, was that? Facebook. So ever since the introduction of Facebook, we have been adding 5 exabytes of data every 2 days to our information base. But is that big? I mean, we could look at the pictorially, it's about the size of Congress. In 2010, the world created enough data to reach to the moon and back. But really, does that say that much to us? And then I found another YouTube video. It talks about the size of big data. And I thought it gave a really good representation of what and how big data is actually getting in a way that I could understand it, and people that I could speak to at the point of time could understand it. Because we're all becoming social and media oriented. 333, I'm sure my son's got that many iTunes things on his iPad as well. So that's one exabyte by 1,000 equals 1 zettabyte. So one hard drive containing that much information would be the size of Antarctica. So when you look at it, we're getting pretty big. We're getting it to have a massive amount of information that's being added every day to our information and knowledge base. So how did we get to where we're going here? Well, first of all, we have to be able to manage that data. How are we managing this data? We can't have a hard drive the size of Antarctica everywhere. Any idea how we're managing this size of data? No? In the cloud. And that is what's been driving the growth of data even more. And we'll talk about that through mobile devices as we go forward. So who are the biggest culprits or contributors to the growth of data in the world? As you can see in this slide here, North America has been blamed for adding 3,500 petabytes. Europe 2,000, and that takes into account all of Europe. And you've got Middle East, Latin America, and then what could be loosely termed the Asia-Pacific region. Interestingly, there was no data that I could find in this particular context for Australia. That's interesting given we're the highest take-up of mobile devices globally. I think we've got 2 or 3 mobile devices per person in the country. But if you take into consideration the combined output of the Asia-Pacific region, you can see that now we're starting to get become higher contributors to data globally. So this dynamic is changing. How is the data being added? Can anyone hazard a guess? Someone tell me how much data is being added today using traditional means of a PC? Anybody have a guess?
30.
30? Anyone else? It's not much higher than 10% of data. The rest of it is being added through mobile devices. Does anyone have a BYOD? Does everyone know what BYOD means? Yeah, okay. Those who don't, BYOD means bring your own device. Okay, it looks like some people don't understand what that means. A lot of organisations, well, the smartphone itself is almost becoming ubiquitous in everyday life, right? Everyone has a smartphone. Well, not necessarily, but everyone that's in business generally does. You take a tablet, you take a phone to work, but then when you go out to the field to work, or when you go to a client's organisation, or when you're travelling overseas, or you want to go home and do work because you're unwell or you can telecommute, we need some mobile devices to be able to do that. And BYOD means a company doesn't provide you with a mobile device to do that. You bring your own. And I use my iPhone for my work, or I use my tablet to do my stuff when I go and do presentations. It's not provided by the organisation. And that's been, I guess, some positives and negatives on that approach. The positive side is we're becoming more mobile, less reliant on having to be stuck in an office or carry around USB drives or come with all this paper to cut down the Amazon to provide information to our clients. We can take it with us in an electronic form. The flip side of it is the security around that data and how people are accessing that data inside secure areas. And that in itself has driven a whole new industry in information protection. So BYOD is contributing to the growth of data. So as I mentioned before, the mobile platform is increasingly becoming the largest contributor to data that we have globally. Smartphones are the largest contributor of that. What's interesting about that, as I mentioned before, not everybody has a smartphone. or smartphones are not the most common device that is used in mobile telecommunications. I guess there's still the flip-top phone that people carry around like that, Nokia and what have you. But the smartphones, despite that being a lower quantity, still contribute the most amount of information. And why? We'll see in a minute. As I mentioned before, the changing dynamic of data is now coming through the Asia Pacific region, and it's growing exponentially every day. But it's not all about size. Not long ago, Gartner did a study and came up with the three V's: volume, velocity, and variety. Now, 2 or 3 days ago, Miles sent me a link saying, "Here, Glenn, have a look at this. This is a new big data strategy just put out by Autonomy for comment." And they've added themselves another 2 V's. You look elsewhere on the web, and there's other V's that mean what another organisation wants to contribute to the debate on what really describes big data. But the common accepted explanation for how to look at and manage big data is volume, talk about large amounts of information; velocity, it needs to be done quickly or it's even being added quickly; and variety, which talks about the different types of data. But whilst data size isn't the major contributor, it certainly is a significant one. And if we look at the amount of data that's being added at any one time, and this is, by the way, pretty much just looking at some social media or emails, 30 billion pieces of content were added to Facebook in the last month. My son is contributing 4,762 text messages a month. There are 32 billion searches on Twitter. More than 2 million videos were watched on YouTube yesterday. And Zignar, anyone heard of Zignar? It's a gaming type of platform. 1 petabyte of content for players every day, and that's unmatched anywhere else. So, whilst it is one factor or one part of what big data is, it is certainly a significant contributor. So, that comes back to, does that support what Troy was saying, that anything over 100 gig is what big data actually is? But then we want to talk about velocity and variety. So velocity, if you can remember back, talks about the speed that it's either being distributed or filtered, or it's being added to the information repository. So 2.9 million emails are added every second, 20 hours of video are uploaded every minute on YouTube, and there are 50 million tweets a day. That's probably why one of the professors you were talking about before didn't want to go on Twitter. He thought he had to give 50 million tweets a day. Which interestingly, tweet became a accepted word in the dictionary just most recently. It's now become official. And we have variety. That is people to people, machine to people, and machine to machine. So basically, what we're saying here is we've got all this big data here still. So this is our volume. But now we're adding 2 other factors into the equation to agree with what Gartner was saying. We're getting a whole lot of information and data being added into our information repository at a significantly fast rate. 2.9 million emails sent every second, some when we're in your organisation. I mean, who comes to work every morning and you've got 50, 30, 20, what have you, emails sitting in your inbox to go through? All right. My wife sends me text messages, my son sends me an email or a video of what he's just finished doing, or blowing up a balloon or gas explosion in science every Thursday afternoon, laughing and carrying on. So It's the amount of data being added just to my personal devices on a daily basis is absolutely, you know, I remember sitting down when I was at the intersection up in Townsville. I sat down to a 285 computer. We used, I don't even think we had Word Perfect, I think we had. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. I go over here, pull out all my documents from the library, look through it, and then put it back again. And now I just pull out my smartphone and look at it that way. So we've got velocity coming into it as well. Everything is streaming at a huge rate. So this is making it even more difficult for you to filter at a really timely rate the information that you need to understand what you've got in your data repository. But then you have variety, okay? So we have Julian giving me a call and say, Glen, what are you doing, mate? Oh, I'm here talking to a client about big data. I said, I'm good on you. All right, so we're adding information, and he said, let me just send you a document that I've got about big data from our information holding. So he then flicked it across to me, and I can then open it up out of Dropbox, or I can open it up from an email. Email's old school, to show my client exactly what it is. So we're adding data that way, all right? And then we've got it from, you know, people through the machine. All right? So I'm sitting at my laptop, and I'm adding data in there. All right? I'm sitting down. I just finished doing a risk review of one of our clients in Queensland, or in Melbourne, or wherever I've just come back from, and I'm writing up a report for them to show them what exactly we found, what the outcomes were of our risk assessment. And then I'm bringing in a whole heap of data to there. I'm embedding videos, or I'm embedding photos, I'm just enhancing it, because if you give a report now that's just words, it's lost. So you're adding more and more data to your own information repositories as well. So there's a lot of variety. And then we have, this is really a bad drawing of a house. It's supposed to be electricity substation or something, I don't know. And we've got machine to machine, all right? You can have GPS. We had, I saw a really good description when I was doing some research of, you know, the energy smart devices that tell you how much energy you're using in your home, so you can turn lights off and what have you. So that is what we call machine-to-machine data being added as well. So what we've got is these smart devices sending information back down through to the energy provider, who can then do an analysis of where most of the energy needs to be pushed out to. But with variety, we also have different types of data. And they are can you remember unstructured and structured data? So we all know the difference between structured and unstructured data. All right, so from a structured perspective, we've got maybe our SAP databases, you know, Excel spreadsheets, everything's nice, tucked away, little numbers everywhere, and that's adding it to it as well. And then we have our unstructured data, which is all our blogs, emails, anything that is not into a table database or what have you. So now we have different types of variety being added to the information just as quickly. So we've got people to people, people to machine, and machine to machine, and then the different types of data as well. So our data is getting bigger and bigger and more diverse as we're going on. But to me, there's one other V missing, and everyone has to add their own little contribution to the debate, and that is value. There's not much use. Oh, this is great. The value of big data lies in our ability to extract insights and make better decisions. To me, there's not a whole lot of use of doing something without getting any value out of it. What's the use of me providing, looking at, in fact someone was, we were talking with somebody last night and said that they just finished doing a file audit and spent the whole time going through a whole heap of data from the computer, matching it against the hard copy, and spent all day doing it. I was really happy when they managed to get that time down to a short period of 30 seconds per file. But what was the value of doing all that? And could it happen earlier, quicker and less and easier? Yes, it can with data analytics. So there's been a few studies on how data analytics can improve or add value to an organisation. And interestingly, 72% of organisations consider driving operational efficiency to be the biggest benefit of a big data strategy, of how to manage your big data. And 50% of organisations say that big data helps in better meeting consumer demand and facilitating growth. Up in the retail industry here, having a good digital big data strategy in place will help them be more productive by 49% and increase their revenue by something like $9 billion. This is a US study, by the way. So, extracting data from information, just extracting value from information is I guess, what we're all about and what big data is starting to become. Has anyone ever defragged their computer? This is probably an old term. This is what the screen you get. Daniel, have you ever defragged, ever seen something like that? No. Probably too young to know what that is. Sorry. So what did you normally do? You know, when you saw this, you go to defrag your computer. It's because it's running slow, and all these little gaps in here mean that clusters of information are being stored here, there, and everywhere. Right, so you ran the program to make it to, bring the clusters of information back together again. So that's what it looked like. But you know what that actually is? That's the amount of information. That is the information being held on Wikipedia right now. That's a screenshot of information held on Wikipedia. So, as you can see, there's not much space there, and I don't know how much they could get out of it if they defrag that one. I won't follow any further. So, now that we sort of have a bit of an understanding of what big data is, what can we do with it? Excuse me. I don't know if are they the vultures from Dumbo? Jungle Book, thank you. So what shall we do with big data? I don't know, what do you want to do with big data? Well, I guess one of the good options that have come out most recently, and I guess a little bit controversially, is that the NSA decided what they should do with it, and are using a program called Prism. And this poor old lady is upset because NSA won't send their backup copy of her database to them. But really, when you look at it, it's just the latest product of big data. Who uses, we all use Google, right? Who doesn't use Google? Is anyone not on Facebook? Okay, this might be interesting. Okay. Is anyone in business not on Facebook? Okay. The technologies that NSA and all those other type of organisations are using for Prism have been available in the technology era for a while. Think about when you do a Google search. I'm going to Google, you know what, I haven't seen Julian's new book. I'm going to go to Amazon, I'm earning some brownie points here. I'm going to go to Amazon and have a look at it and buy it. And while I'm there, I might just cruise for a few other books I like as well. About a day later, 2 days later, I'm on my Facebook account, checking out what my daughter's doing, if she hasn't blocked me, and find out where she is and what she's not doing. And then all of a sudden I get an ad pop up. And the ad is from Amazon. And some of the books I looked at, I thought, geez, you know, that's pretty good. I like that book. When I saw it the other day, I might go and buy it. So it's exactly the same technology that Google has been using to track you, and advertisers have been using to track you, that the NSA have been employing to protect CONUS. Although I'm sure Mr. Snowden has a different perspective on that. I mentioned or touched on it a little bit earlier, that AGIMO put out, AGIMO, I'm sorry, that's my pronunciation of it, have put out a white paper for discussion, or a strategy for discussion. I think it ends up early next month for comments back. They've got a good site you go to, and you enter your blog comments to it, so they're becoming really good. We're really entering the digital world. And it talks about how the public sector is going to manage big data with an improved understanding through enhanced data analytics capability. And that's on their website now. You can go and have a look at it. And from their perspective, data has been, for a long time, been a national and government asset. So what they're looking to do is introduce policy that will, I guess, provide effective and judicious management of data analytics. They're looking to use to streamline, push something there, streamline service delivery, innovation, and identify new areas of service, and look to collaborate more and more with organisations. There's been a Centre of Excellence startup called the Data Analytics Centre of Excellence, which has been run by the ATO, or managed by the ATO in accordance with their paper. And it's looking to build a capability across government by establishing a common framework on data analytics, sharing knowledge, and then working with organisations such as business, commercial enterprise, CSIRO, those types of organisations. Interesting, and we touched on it previously, it identified the skill sets, or touched on it, the growth of ICT roles as a result of big data. I think it made mention of some 4.4 million ICT roles required by the next 6 years, of which, interestingly, 2/3 will remain unfilled. There is a huge dearth, I guess, of ICT data scientists, or those well versed in the management of big data analytics, available right now. A couple of examples of where the government are using this at the moment. Human Services are using a program developed by CSIRO called VISI to look at their social media area and helping them engage with their customers better. And DIAC have introduced, to work with government, have introduced, using big data, or the management of big data, tools into transit areas in our ports to look at high-risk travellers coming through and to intercept them at a higher rate. From a commercial perspective, big data has changed the landscape and the way we do business as well. Anyone recognise that scene? Matrix? Yeah, Matrix. In 2000, I was lucky enough to spend a year on Bougainville with only intermittent electricity, and the only DVD I had for a year was Matrix. So I got to know it pretty well, and I can tell you that picture there is when Neo first saw the Matrix and the Sentinels and was able to kill them. Told you I was a geek? I'm sorry. But that's what I remember. But how else is that being employed, that type of technology? So it's basically, it was the concept was, you know, not quite Skynet, but you know, the computers took over the world and we were being farmed to provide energy. But it's really based on big data that was being driven into people's minds to see what was happening in the real world, in the Matrix. Now, there have been another couple of movies that I like that just recently. One, I don't know, recently when Arnie first released it, and now Colin Farrell did one just recently, called Total Recall. Everyone seen Total Recall? Yeah? No? It's basically about implanting a memory or an experience into your brain. So pretty far-fetched, right? Yeah? About a month ago, I was mentoring a couple of start-up tech businesses out of UQ, up in Brisbane, and two of the pitches were on augmented reality, predominantly based around travel. So they're targeting the time-poor, digitally rich people who can't get time to go away, who feel that they can't get time away. So they go and visit these guys, put on a visor or a screen, 3D related, and have an experience about going to Rome or Venice or Disney World. So big data is allowing that to happen. It's providing the cloud, is providing the capability to be able to suck in more and more and more data. The development of innovation of applications and machines is allowing the processing of data ever more and more quicker to be able to establish that. From a commercial perspective, as you all know, JBS developed apps to be able to use on your iPad to do some of your work. Other organisations are doing exactly the same thing. And it's the use of and employment of those applications to manage the large amount of data that you have that helps your business grow in revenue, but in productivity as well. To me, there are 5 broad ways that big data can create value. First, big data of information needs to be unlocked. It needs to be transparent and used at a higher frequency. Issues around that: privacy, use of other people's data. So legislation and policy need to address that. The next one is the collection of data. Google's there, wants your data, and they're doing everything about it. I have to be nice. My brother actually is a network architect for Google Fiber, so I have to be somewhat pleasant to him about Google, even though they are taking over the world. There is a development of better data analytics that helps everyone manage and look through the information repository they have, then make informed decisions about what that is. Customer segmentation, huge one for the retail industry, of identifying what customer wants and does what. I saw a great presentation not long ago about a facial recognition technology matched in with a loyalty card system where they would identify people coming into a particular retail store and what they bought, how happy they were when they bought it. It was combined with an emotional analysis technology too. And so what they were looking at was they found out what the person liked to buy, how many times they went through different bits of items, how happy they were when they buy it. Listen, let's admit it, when we buy something, it's an emotional reaction. If I buy my chocolate, I'm really, really happy, even happier when I eat it. And so they were able to target and become more efficient in how they dealt with their customers quicker and generated more revenue. And the last one is innovation. And it's the development of new ideas to, one, better manage our data, but also there are spin-offs as well: security, safety, HR. So what does the big data landscape look like? It's almost as confusing as when you go to Google and ask, what is big data? There are so many different applications: infrastructure, data as a service, operational, everyone, I guess, technologies that we've all heard of Hadoop, operational intelligence, business intelligence, analytics and visualization. There's a plethora of technologies that are out there that can be used to be able to manage, work with, refine, identify your big data, work through it, and come up with a strategy to utilise it, and utilise it to make your organisation bigger and better, or deal with your clients a lot easier. Just, I guess, wrapping it up, to me there are several issues that need to be addressed to capture the full potential of big data. Privacy, security, we've sort of touched on somewhat, and that intellectual property, and that needs to be addressed from a government perspective. An organisation needs to put in place and understand the right technologies. I talk with a lot of people at the coalface, even in the IT section, that what are you doing, what tools are you using to manage your data, or how you're accessing it? And they're just as confused as everybody else of how to go about doing it. So it's getting the right technologies and people in place to be able to manage the big data, but unfortunately, and just as importantly, is to put the right structure for workflows and incentives to optimise that big data as well. Access to data is critical. Increasingly need to integrate with other organisations and third parties to get access to data sources. And there needs to be, I guess, incentives in place to enable this. And despite what Dilbert and the crew up there say, big data isn't the enemy. If we embrace it and accept it and use it, it will actually help us innovate and excel from a business perspective. Thank you. That's any questions? I'm happy to take any questions on that at all.
Glen, is there anything you can say about the demographic of big data? So you look at smartphones there and said how they are producing a significantly larger percentage or ratio of the big data available.
Yeah.
Does that then speak to a small segment of the population that are producing the big data, and therefore less people are producing more big data, or is it becoming more widespread across the globe?
It's an interesting question, and I would have said some time ago that it would be a younger generational contribution to data. But now we're seeing the use of social media and smartphones being accepted across all of business and across a large demographic, age, generation bracket of people. So in the past, I guess up until 3 years ago, no, 2008, 5 years ago, I didn't have a Facebook account, but I thought, gee whiz, I need to. I'm living away from my daughter, so I need to find out what she's doing and she needs to tell. 3 years ago, I decided to get a Twitter account. 2 years ago, I took up blogging. I now have my own blog space. I write for a couple of commercial websites, and I'm 48. So I think that demographic is certainly changing. I think that you could have argued previously that it really has been the remit or the domain of the younger generation, but that's changing. In fact, I think the younger generation maybe even sort of stepping away from that as much as not as much, but because we're taking, it's being now, it's not seen as overly cool, but they were born into this type of activity as well. So every day they're just second nature to it. It's like snowboarding, I guess. I snowboard, so now my daughter skis because it's not cool. Yeah.
Yeah, with that growth of data, you have to take into account that the vast majority of that data is media downloads from YouTube and other places. And that's where the smartphones come in.
Sure.
They're creating videos and
Yeah.
going up in the company and they get distributed.
Absolutely.
According to Nate Silver,
Yeah.
he reckons more than 90% of all what is deemed to be big data is video.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, the ability to analyse that is limited, and it's more metadata which comes into effect.
Yes, I do agree with you in part. Sorry. But we could also say, probably don't need that. We could also say that this presentation is big data. We could, because if I tried to access that on my 285, I wouldn't be able to do that. They touched on the video to start off with, which was, I guess, a video, avatar. If I tried to show that in a 3D representation, it didn't have the tools to do that. That was big data.
Yeah.
So if I'm uploading a document to my web page, and it doesn't have the capacity to do that, then that's considered to be big data as well. So yeah, social media is by far one of the largest contributor to the explosion of big data globally. Videos are going up sort of every second. People are watching millions of videos every day. We're embedding videos in. We were just talking yesterday about embedding videos into websites, but then making sure that then you have to think about, okay, I'm going to put a video on our website. I need to make sure it's 4 seconds or less long, or very small, So then when my clients go onto it via their mobile device, they can still see the videos. Otherwise it'd be too big data for them to see that information. So there's a whole strategy that needs to be put in place to be able to manage it, and you get right. And so social media is a big contributor, but social media is now becoming, or mobile devices, we can call it mobile devices, are now becoming everyday life. You know, Google Glass. People are going to be wearing Google Glasses everywhere. Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts? No? No? Nothing from Mr. Peace. I saw you the other. I saw you sitting out there from yesterday.
Well, actually, one other question. How was the world coping with the storage of it? Because
sure.
That doesn't matter if it's in the cloud or not.
Yeah.
It's still got to be stored somewhere.
Yeah, and so you see the growth of Amazon, Google, not in storage, but transference. Was it last week? Google flicked up all these balloons over New Zealand and introduced a network for people to be able to talk to each other from it. And they're looking at doing it globally. So they've set up their own wireless infrastructure or network using that. But it's through the growth of data storage areas and the innovation of how to store that information in that hosted environment is where it's all happening. I don't know if you've been to North Carolina, is it Amazon down there, or Google. The hosting areas are absolutely massive, but then they have them located everywhere and they're able to transfer that information through different continents, electronically as well. Big downfall of it, and it should never happen, is about 2 months ago they had a big storm tornado go through that area, hit Washington, the whole east coast, knocked the power out in those areas on 2 occasions. So the disaster recovery was pretty poor. But that's how it's happening. It is the management of in the cloud. And businesses are moving that too well. We talked about BYOD before. And you see it all the time. You go into an organisation and there is Mr. 20-something, 30-something, now becoming 40-something, walking into a new organisation, very smart, digitally savvy, and saying, do you guys have look, I want to work from home today, or I'm going to be travelling to Jakarta tomorrow, or I'm going to Roma. Do you have a mobile device or a cloud environment where I can access information, or do I have to download it? You know, and so people are putting in organisations are putting in strategies to be able to do that. We looked at an organisation that was looking at Box, we looked at Dropbox, we looked at all these capabilities of being able to manage information externally. So there is a growing trend to move from hybrid to public, hybrid environments. And by hybrid environments, I mean you have some infrastructure in your location, but you use a web hosting environment to host other bits of your information. Using those types of activity methodologies to access information is becoming more and more common, I guess. And I talked to a friend of mine who runs Flux, a big web hosting organisation up in Queensland, and his advice is interesting. When hosting first came in, is that, and from a good security perspective, you have to have some redundancy of when you store your information, you store it off-site, right? You don't keep it there in case the office burns down and you lose all the information. His perspective was, use me as your prime source of information storage, but keep all your backups on site. So it's almost reversing that whole mentality that we had previously. But certainly, cloud and hosting environments will soon. I don't think people are quite ready yet to give up all their infrastructure, but the cost associated with is driving it pretty quickly.
I guess one of the really interesting questions here is what the algorithms are that derive this, that second, third, fourth order interpretation from the materials.
Sure.
And there seems to me that one of the intriguing things at the moment is the way that some of the more imaginative companies come up with some really neat solutions. I've forgotten the particular Israeli company that came up with this thing, but I think Google just bought them. And the trick is that you feed in your Google Calendar and all of that to this program. It works out, for example, that you typically go to work in Russell from wherever. Not only will it tell you what the expected travel time is, but when there's a smash on Northbourne Avenue slowing the traffic down, it will send you an alert to leave for work 15 minutes early because of the traffic delays. Now, to me, that's a really intriguing notion that actually...
Intuitive.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people in my generation get very upset about Google. Oh, well, it undermines memory. I say, why would I memorize anything? I outsourced it to Google. It remembers stuff for me. And what's more, it's a good deal more accurate than my
Well, I'm losing my memory anyway, so I think it's a great thing.
Yeah,
You know?
so I find it intriguing to think about the fact that it doesn't really matter how much information is there. It doesn't really matter how fast it flows. It doesn't even matter what the variety is. What matters is what we can do with it.
Exactly.
And I think there are some intriguing implications there. Just so I didn't leave you with one thought, which is that increasingly it's clear in the social sciences that there are things that it's not good asking people what they want and what they do, because actually half the time we don't really know. What's intriguing now is in the big data space that we need to find algorithms that will actually tell us the answers to things that we don't know about ourselves. And that may sound spooky, but actually it's always been the case that other people understood you better than you understood yourself. It's just that Google's added to the list.
So I give my 2 points to that, if I could. I think we've always had big data. Going by the definition, if you don't have the capacity, what you had in place to filter that data in time. So all the information in the libraries in Alexandria, what have you, left to little Joe Romano, whatever it is, Cleopatra, to facilitate or understand. To me, to them, it's big data. So they're still going. And the second point is that is the beauty of big data is driving innovation to meet the requirements that we need. We didn't know, when an iPhone came out, we didn't know we needed an iPhone until he gave it to us. We now didn't know that we needed to call this big data until 10 years ago. So we've always had it, we just didn't know we had it.
And no one uses the phone to make phone calls.
Well, thankfully.
It goes off in my pocket on horror.
I was like, what is that? Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it does everything but make a phone call. A very final, John.
Glen, you said there's going to be a huge skill shortage coming.
Sure.
And what are the sort of skills that are going to be in demand? What are the implications for Australia if we can't meet that demand?
Well, quite significant, but to some degree they have been addressed. And I touched on data scientists, but also you're looking at analytical capability, software development, innovation. To give them their due, there was has been recently been sponsored and now expanded. The current federal government sponsored a group called Group X that was out of a guy called Simon Kaplan, Professor Simon Kaplan was running out of QUT, and that looked at involving kids from school age, encouraging them, getting them to the ICT sector. This has now just been expanded and taken over by the federal government, where they're adding, I think, $3 million a year to start facilitating that. And that to encourage the growth of involvement in the ICT sector. And these kids were shown, I think they were grade 6 and 7, they'd written a program allowing kids to be able to work through their maths quicker. They were doing robotics. It was phenomenal. I was extremely impressed with what they were doing there. So, yeah, there will be. And it's the data scientist area, the analytical, the software development, and just the whole understanding of ICT.
One thing to keep in mind is Australia produces roughly 6,000 ICT graduates per year. Last year, less than 51% of them were employed in the sector after 6 months.
Yeah.
So one thing which could happen is they got employed.
They were
Employed.
they're employed in something outside.
If you want people to work in the sector, you've got to employ them.
Yeah.
So if you're going to leave them on the benches and employ people from overseas, you're going to
Yeah, for sure. And it's it's a global requirement as well. So you're going to see trade.
The other thing there is too that we produce a large number of statistics and social science graduates each year. Canberra, we have a guy called Robert Ackland who runs a web sciences history. He gets maybe 2 or 3 people doing the courses which specialise in that each year to actually apply and help the people actually do it.
So it's
It encourages staff to do courses.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess that should be a large part of any strategy within an organisation to encourage professional development in the particular area that you're moving along in. And if that's project management or ICT, that's a good policy. Okay, I think we're wrapping that up. Time. Thank you very much for coming along. I hope I've provided you with some food for thought. And please don't hesitate to give me a call if I can help in any way. Thank you. Have a good day.